Welcome to episode number 12 of Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa for September 13th, 2020. What does Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson and the 2016 unsolved Las Vegas Land Kauffman double homicide have in common? Well, if you read the 25-plus stories that I authored relating to Judge Tobiasson and the Land Kauffman murders that were published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner in 2019, or more recently listened to my podcasts, which are my new form for my investigative journalism, then you would know the answer. To date, no one has been charged with the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman. The Homicide Division of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, who had the reputation years ago as one of the best homicide units in the country for closure rates, are apparently stumped in this investigation. Or are they? That said, as I have previously reported, questionable behavior and investigative tactics by the police have raised some very serious questions that remain unsolved to this day. Next month, October 27th, will be 4 years since the bodies of Sidney Land, 21, and Nehemiah Kauffman, 20, were found, both shot in the head execution style, in their southwest Las Vegas apartment. Sex trafficking, allegations of police corruption, misconduct, and negligence, including a possible cover-up, has surrounded the unsolved murders. Interestingly enough, many of those allegations have originated from Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson herself, both in an on-the-record recorded interview with me that I conducted with the judge in May of 2018, and conversations Judge Tobiasson had with Connie Land, the mother of Sidney Land, during 2017. Judge Tobiasson has alleged, on the record with me, that homicide detective Jared Grimmett told her after the murders that 2 convicted felons and known pimps, Shane Valentine and Dominique Thompson, along with Frankie Zappia, the stepdaughter of a retired Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department police officer, executed Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman at 12:30 a.m. on October 26, 2016, and that the police had all the evidence to prove that. Tobiasson claimed that the police were covering up the murders and that the police probably destroyed evidence. According to Tobiasson, she was receiving confidential investigative information about the murder investigation, including evidentiary details from Detective Grimmett. Tobiasson also confirmed separately and apart from that interview, in a May 13, 2018 email to me, that Detective Jared Grimmett was the one who was providing information to her. Why Judge Tobiasson was meddling into a double murder investigation in the first place is unknown, and why a Las Vegas Metro Police homicide detective would compromise the investigation and his career by releasing information to Tobiasson, as she claims, also remains unknown. Judge Tobiasson's husband is a retired Las Vegas Metro police sergeant. Speculation surrounds Tobiasson's daughter Sarah and Sarah's involvement at the time of the murders with the daughter of another Las Vegas Metro police officer, Clarence Ty Bowden. Allie Bowden stated in a 2017 text message to a friend that I obtained that her father wanted to kill Shane Valentine. Sarah Tobiasson was a friend of Nehemiah Kauffman, and according to Judge Tobiasson, Sarah told her that Shane Valentine was involved in the murders. Sarah, according to information that I obtained, also knew Daniel Stewart, also known as Super Cool Dodge, the person who found Land and Kauffman's bodies on October 27, 2016, and then notified the police. Both Judge Tobiasson and her daughter Sarah also had involvement with Shane Valentine prior to the murders that you hear about just a little later. Judge Tobiasson also linked the murders to her and her daughter Sarah being outed as a source of confidential information to Ty Bowden and his daughter Allie by Las Vegas Metro Police Vice Detective Justine Gaddis approximately 8 hours before the Land Kauffman murders occurred. Tobiasson also said that the wrong 2 people were killed. Her and her daughter were meant to be killed, not Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman. To this day, Tobiasson has not commented any further. Las Vegas Metro Police, to this date, have not refuted what Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson has said. If Tobiasson is not telling the truth about who committed the murders, and her comments implicating the police detective in misconduct who allegedly gave her the information, then why hasn't Sheriff Joseph Lombardo, who runs the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, commented publicly and defended the reputation of his department and Detective Grimmett? The families of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman deserve the truth, both from the police and Judge Tobiasson. On September 1st, I broke the story on podcast number 10 that the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline filed formal statement of charges against Tobiasson for, among other things, meddling into the double murder investigation, a topic I have been covering exclusively for over a year and a half. After I broke the story, the Las Vegas media on September 2nd and 3rd followed suit. The Las Vegas Review-Journal acknowledged in their article my May 2018 interview with Judge Tobiasson that was published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner. The Journal of the American Bar Association, in a September 4th article, also quoted my interview with Tobiasson. On September 3rd, Jeremy Chen, a reporter with KTNV Las Vegas 13 Action News, reported, quote, Vegas police say Valentine is no longer a, quote, person of interest, unquote, in a double homicide that occurred in October of 2016 when 21-year-old Sidney Land and 20-year-old Land Kauffman were killed. On September 4th, Connie Land, Sidney Land's mother, who has been an outspoken critic of both the police investigation into the murders and Judge Melanie Tobiasson's involvement, sent an email to Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Sergeant Michael Fletcher, asking why she had to find out through the news media that Shane Valentine was no longer a person of interest in the murders. In the email, which Mrs. Land provided to Truth and Consequences, she asked Sergeant Fletcher, quote, why am I finding out from News 13 that Shane is no longer a person of interest as of yesterday afternoon? When were you going to bother telling us? Think we should have known before the news? I guess I need to go to Grimmett's Kids to find out about who the persons of interest are. This is no different than having people call me seeing the photos of my daughter's body on national television. LVMPD didn't bother giving us a heads up about those photos being blasted across the nation. Typical of LVMPD, Mrs. Land wrote. I previously reported that in March of this year, Connie Land received information from a friend of her murdered daughter that homicide detective Jared Grimmett's daughter, Taylor, once had a personal relationship with Shane Valentine, the suspect in the double homicide that Jared Grimmett was investigating. Connie Land was also told that Detective Grimmett's son, Tristan, had told this friend that his father told him that Shane Valentine did not commit the murders, and that if this friend wanted any more information, he could talk to his father when he saw him. Connie Land was provided the text message between Grimmett's son and his friend. Mrs. Land provided that text message to Truth and Consequences, which I published in a previous podcast. After complaining to Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Sergeant Michael Fletcher about the text message, Connie Land was told it wasn't an issue with the department. Apparently, it's not an issue either with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department that Detective Grimmett leaked confidential details to Judge Tobiasson concerning the double homicide investigation, as Tobiasson claimed. Is it an issue with the police that the crime scene analyst did not remove the bullet from the residence of Nehemiah Kauffman's mother's house on October 8, 2016, when Shane Valentine shot into the occupied residence, at the same time threatening the lives of not only Nehemiah Kauffman, but also his mother and Sidney Land? The single most crucial piece of evidence that could link a suspect found with the firearm to the crime was not recovered at the crime scene, thereby jeopardizing the chain of custody. Less than 3 weeks later, Sidney and Nehemiah Kauffman were both found shot to death in their apartment. We still have no comment from the police on Detective Mitchell Dorsch's April 2018 text message to Connie Land, where he states the double homicide investigation was compromised after the murders, so much so that they have to pick up the pieces. More on that later. I guess it's not an issue also when I reported last year that 2 days after the police cleared the crime scene at the apartment, Sidney Land's father, Steve Land, a Clark County, Nevada firefighter, went into the apartment and found evidence that was left behind by the police in the same blood-stained room that his daughter's body was found. A mason jar filled with love letters from Nehemiah Kauffman's former girlfriend and a paycheck stub of another man. Steve Land told me he called Jared Grimmett and then met him and turned over the evidence. Mr. Land said Grimmett said nothing. As for Nehemiah Kauffman's former girlfriend, I later found out was not only still sexually involved with Kauffman during the time he was living with Sidney in the apartment, but she was living with Kauffman's mother at the time of the murders. And the pay stub that was found by Steve Land, that may belong to a son of a Nevada highway patrolman, but I have not confirmed that positively to this date. On September 8th, I was informed by Metro Police Public Information Officer Larry Hatfield that Shane Valentine was no longer a suspect nor a person of interest in the Land Kauffman murders. Hatfield said if they had evidence to charge someone, they would have, but it's an ongoing investigation. Hatfield would not elaborate any further. A suspect is a person who police believe committed the crime, and a person of interest is someone who the police believe may have information about the crime. Reference to Shane Valentine, the police have been back and forth with him since the 2016 murders. After the murders, Shane Valentine was a suspect, obviously so, because he had shot into Alethea Kauffman's house on October 8, 2016, and then after the murders fled to Southern California, where he was subsequently apprehended and brought back to Las Vegas by Metro Homicide detectives Jared Grimmett and Mitchell Dosh, and charged with shooting into the Kauffman residence, a case, by all accounts, that should have been handled properly by property crime detectives prior to the murders. But it wasn't. It is my understanding that Valentine was not in possession of a firearm when he was arrested in California. But as I reported last year, a police report that I obtained relating to the murders lists a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Unknown whether that firearm was found at the murder scene or added into the report at a later date because it has a connection to the case. After the murders, Detective Mitchell Dosh found out that the bullet was never recovered at the October 8th shooting, so he went back to the residence with the crime scene analyst and recovered the bullet from the upstairs bedroom ceiling. I believe what he was hoping for is that the recovered bullet from the ceiling would either match the bullets that were fired into Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman and or a firearm that might be found in Valentine's possession. Since Valentine was not charged with the murders in 2016 after he was apprehended in California, I can only hypothesize that the police did not recover a firearm linked to Valentine that matched, nor did the bullets from the crime scene match the bullet from the bedroom ceiling, if indeed there was enough left of the bullets to analyze. For the record, Judge Tobiasson told me that the police were covering up the murders. That statement by Tobiasson, when juxtaposed with the fact that Detective Dosh went back to recover the bullet from Mrs. Kauffman's house after the murders, just doesn't fit. Dosh was hoping that a forensic ballistic match would implicate Valentine. That does not sound like a detective that was trying to cover up a double murder case, rather a detective who was trying to solve it. As for Shane Valentine, 1 year after the murders, in November of 2017, then Homicide Lieutenant Dan McGrath said at a press briefing that Shane Valentine was not a suspect at that time. In April of 2018, Detective Mitchell Dosh on the show Crime Watch Daily said, quote, "Although it appears he may not have been the shooter, possibility remains that he was aware of what was going to happen." On October 25, 2018, the current Homicide Lieutenant Ray Spencer said at a press briefing that, quote, "We have not ruled out Shane Valentine as a suspect. We are still looking at him as a person of interest in this case." Now, in September of 2020, according to the Las Vegas Metro Police Public Information Office, Shane Valentine is not a suspect or a person of interest in the case. In short, according to the police over the years, Shane Valentine was, then wasn't, then could be, then was again, now isn't, involved in the murders, with no explanation by the police. Now, let's go back and revisit some audio excerpts, after which I will have some closing comments, including some updates. Here is then Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Lieutenant Dan McGrath commenting to the media in February of 2017 about the brutality of the crime.
This one was basically an assassination execution, of two very young people.
Several months later, in November of 2017, Lieutenant Dan McGrath made the following statement to the Las Vegas media concerning the Land Kauffman double homicide.
So, good afternoon. It's Lieutenant Dan McGrath, MCGRATH, Metro Homicide. So I'm going to make a quick statement, and then I'll take a couple of questions. Based on the crime scene, there was not forced entry, so we don't think that somebody broke the door down. And so there was a few things going on within the couple. But what I can tell you is Sydney Land was an innocent victim. And if she was not with Neo Meyer Kauffman, she may not have been a victim of this. So we believe that he may have been the target of this. He did have some associations with some criminal activity that we've uncovered. And we're more than a year into this case, and we still don't have a lot to go on. So we're asking for the public's assistance to try to move this case forward and help them get some closure. And I'll just take a couple of questions. A number of tips we did get were associated with Shane Valentine. Homicide detectives did arrest him for another shooting, and he is currently in custody awaiting sentencing. At this time, we can say that he is not our suspect. So Shane Valentine is not our suspect at this time. So we want to make that clear for the record. If something does come up and some evidence is uncovered that makes him a suspect, we did look at him, but we don't have anything to say he's our suspect at this time. Sure, the question was about Shane Valentine. So there was a Shane Valentine who quickly became a person of interest. This is all public record because he was arrested. He made some threats. He did fire a gunshot into the mother of Neo's Kauffman's mother's house. And when we learned that, we took that case because it seemed that he would be a likely suspect. And Homicide quickly jumped on that case, and we apprehended him in California, brought him back here. He had some other pending charges for some home invasions. So he is currently in custody and awaiting sentencing for a number of charges, including the shooting. But like I said, a year into the investigation, we've got a number of calls about him, and that's where the majority of the tips have come in. But honestly, we discuss this case almost on a weekly basis. Everybody up to the sheriff has been asking about this case. And at this point, we do not believe that Shane Valentine is our suspect. Yeah, he was associated with Shane Valentine in some of the criminal activities in the past. And he had no criminal history, though, so I hate to really talk too badly about a person that's deceased. He was a very young man. He was just about to turn 20 years old. So, he has a mother, too. We've been in touch with his mother. So that's a fact of the case. So we'll just let that fact stand. Well, as I said, one of the facts of the case is there's no forced entry. So in this particular apartment complex, which is really, I would say, luxury apartment complex, very nice complex, it would seem that somebody was allowed in. So it would seem to us, the facts bear out that they either allowed somebody in, he allowed somebody in that he knew, and she just happened to be there. And it's really a struggle for us at this point, and we want to get this case moving if we can. So there was a close circle of people that all pretty much knew each other within this small group. So it would be unusual if somebody didn't know something. That's what we're saying, and that's why we're here. And I think the family believes that also. And they know everything that we know, we've shared with them. So they know everything that we have on the investigation. So
on April 27, 2018, Las Vegas Metro Police homicide detective Mitchell Dosh sent this disturbing text message to Connie Land, the mother of Sydney Land. Quote, "So many things happened since the murders happened that I've never seen before, and I had zero control over. I won't get into them now, but they are well chronicled. Detective Grimmett and I are left to pick up the pieces and work toward a successful outcome despite all the quote-unquote things that have happened along the way. We are not going away." In April of 2018, the nationally televised show Crime Watch Daily featured the Land Kauffman murders. Las Vegas Metro homicide detectives Jared Grimmett and Mitchell Dosh appeared on the show. Keeping in mind that these murders were still unsolved, as they are to this day, the police released crime scene photographs to the show, including the body of Sidney Land, which was partially blurred out. The police also commented on DNA evidence that was found at the crime scene. Detective Dosh said this about Shane Valentine.
Although it appears that he may not have been the shooter, the possibility remains that he was aware of what was going to happen or what was happened immediately thereafter.
Detective Grimmett said this about the DNA evidence that was found at the crime scene.
Many things stood out. Lack of forced entry. Whoever was in the apartment with them appeared to be someone that they trusted. There were several items that contained DNA evidence. The problem is these people had a lot of friends, a lot of associates, a lot of people that hung out at the apartment complex with them. So sorting through all the details of what was relevant and what's not has been a challenge. I mean, when I refer to DNA, I mean, there's cigarette butts everywhere and the ashtrays full of stuff. There's drink cups everywhere. So you talk about DNA being in the apartment, there's all kinds of stuff, you know. So who knows what was supposed to be there and what wasn't supposed to be there.
A woman who appeared on the Crime Watch Daily episode, whose identity was protected, said she knew Sidney Land and her friend Frankie Zappia. The woman said, quote, "I do believe Frankie's pimp is the killer of Sidney Land," unquote. Frankie Zappia was the last person to see Sidney and Nehemiah alive. Zappia is a convicted prostitute and stepdaughter of a now retired Las Vegas Metro police officer. Dominique Thompson, also known as Damo, a convicted felon, was Zappia's pimp. Crime Watch Daily said that the police have not ruled out Frankie Zappia as a person of interest. When questioned on the show about Dominique Thompson, a.k.a. Damo, Detective Grimmett responded.
We're not going to really talk about Dominic.
Detective Grimmett commented on the show that they have no motive or direction in the case. Yet the police still released crime scene photographs and details of the investigation that should have been kept confidential as to not compromise the integrity of the investigation. I was told by a police source that the authorization for the release of what was shown and stated on Crime Watch Daily came directly out of the office of Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who runs the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Why the head of the LVMPD would approve such a request remains unknown. Crime Watch Daily stated on their show that, quote, "the cops aren't naming Damo as a suspect." Over a month later, after Crime Watch Daily aired, the Nevada Current, an online Las Vegas media outlet, reported in a June 7, 2018 article, quote, that a Metro police spokesperson identified Frankie Zappia and Dominique Thompson as suspects in the double homicide. I contacted the Las Vegas Metro Police Public Information Office to verify if indeed Frankie Zappia and Dominique Thompson, a.k.a. Damo, are considered suspects in the Land Kauffman murders. They did not respond to my inquiry. On June 7, 2018, Detective Dosh sent a text message to Connie Land in reference to Shane Valentine. Quote, "And I think you know Shane has never been eliminated as a potential suspect." 1 year after, then Homicide Lieutenant Dan McGrath told the media in 2017, for the record, that Shane Valentine was not a suspect in the murders. On October 25th of 2018, at a press briefing, the current Homicide Lieutenant, Ray Spencer, said the following, which was the last official word from the Las Vegas Metro Police on the murders to this day.
We have not ruled out Shane Valentine as a suspect. We are still looking at him as a person of interest in this case.
In May of 2018, I conducted a recorded interview with Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson. Judge Tobiasson told me that she was receiving confidential investigative details concerning the Land Kauffman double homicide from Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Detective Jared Grimmett after the murders. Judge Tobiasson told me who committed the murders. The following are excerpts from that interview.
So that night at about 12:30, so it would have been 12:30 October 26th, 12:30 a.m. Shane Valentine, the guy by the name of Dominique Thompson, he went by Domo, D-O-M-O, and a girl by the name of Frankie, F-R-A-N-K-I-E, Zappia, Z-A-P-P-I-A. Shane, Domo, and Frankie, whose stepdad is a police officer by the name of Dano, D-A-N-O, Giersdorf, G-I-E-R-S-D-O-R-F. Go to Neo's house and execute Neo and his girlfriend, Sidney Land. Oh, these murders happened. The first detective who is investigating the case, thank God, is someone who knows me and 3 or 4 weeks after the murders, while Shane Valentine is on the run, what information they have and what proof they have that Shane's involved. But I'm told that they have Domo's DNA, that Frankie's phone pings at the apartment, that they caught Frankie in all kinds of lies. And one of the most significant things is that after the two are dead, nobody ever texted them again. And they know that the fact that they outed me got 2 people killed. They weren't the 2 people they were trying to get killed, me and my daughter, but it got 2 people killed.
During the interview with Judge Tobiasson, she explained why she believes the Land Kauffman murders occurred and why nobody has been charged in the case.
So, October 25th, 2016, at 4:30 in the afternoon, I get a phone call from Detective Van Cleef, and he's frantic. And he says, "We have a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I was asked to sit in on an interview today." He goes, I sit down, and the girl comes into the interview, and the detective who's questioning her is a detective by the name of Justine Gaddis, Gadus. Of all of them, she should be in prison for what she did to me and my daughter.
Who, Justine Gaddis?
So, yeah.
What'd she do?
So, well, I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
She calls Ty Bowden and says she would like to interview his daughter, that they have received information that she is a prostitute or has, is potentially has information with regard to a pimp and human trafficking of juveniles. So they call her in for an interview rather than do independent investigation.
Right.
Because, typically teenage girls will admit in front of their police officer dads that they're prostitutes. I'm being sarcastic, clearly. So they bring her in for an interview with her police officer father. First question out of Justine Gaddis's mouth. Do you know Sarah Tobiasson? Yes, I do. She's one of my best friends. Second statement out of Justine Gaddis's mouth. We got your name from her mom. She says you're working as a prostitute for a pimp by the name of Shane Valentine.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yep. I get the call from Van Cleef, who is beside himself. He goes, I don't know what to do. And I said, how about you get the fuck back in there and fix this? I go, she just put a fucking target on my daughter. I go, you think this guy's going to kill me? He's not going to kill me. He's going to kill my kid. I go, what is wrong with you people? I said, there is no way that this was an accident. I go, no vice detective, I don't care if they've been there for 1 day, would do that by accident. I go, this was intentional. And so he goes back into the interview. He calls me when the interview's over, and he's like, well, we talked to her, and we told her not to talk to your daughter about it. I go, are you an idiot? I go, she's on the phone with my daughter right now. I go, in fact, I'll bet you in 30 seconds I have a call from my daughter. Sure shit. I get a text message from my daughter. Are you serious? You called the police on us? So I bring my daughter and Ollie to my house. I tell them, I go, you guys need to get to the house right now. You're not safe. So
you brought your daughter. You said you said you brought your daughter and who to your house?
Allie, the daughter of the police officer that they had just outed me to.
What's her name?
Allie.
How do you spell that?
Allie.
Okay.
So I bring them to my house, and I have to kind of give them the song and dance because I don't really want to tell them yet that, I don't want to admit to them at this point that I've been bringing information to the cops because, they're still young and they're still, I don't want to lose my connection with them, especially right now.
Right.
So I give them a song and dance about why the police would do this, but I make it very clear to them that they are not safe. And when Van Cleef calls me back, he and Justine want to meet with me and my daughter, and I told them basically to, I won't tell you what I said, but it wasn't very nice. And I said, you guys have a reason for doing what you did, and I don't know what it is, I said that if something happens to my daughter, we can have a real big fucking problem. So that night, unbeknownst to me at this time, Allie leaves my house and she puts out a tweet about the fact that she was called in and questioned by Vice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, unfortunately, at this point, Allie was no longer associated with Shane Valentine. She was associated with Neo Kauffman. And like I said, they had had a beef because Shane was upset that Neo was taking Shane's goals. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Dano?
Right.
A-N-O.
Right.
Here's what. Is the stepfather of Frankie Zappia one of the suspects in the double homicide that happened 8 hours after I was outed as a source of information to one of Shane Valentine's prostitutes who had left him and was now working for Neo. 8 hours later, her new pimp is killed by her old pimp because she puts out on Twitter that she had been called in and interviewed by Vice. They know, and everyone else knows, that this murder happened as a result of what they did that day.
Who'd they kill?
Neo Kauffman, Neo, the kid that had been doing the burglaries with Shane.
Well, he got killed.
He got shot in the head, he got executed, shot in the back of the head. And his girlfriend, Sydney Lynn, don't forget, Shane Valentine shot up Neo's house October 8th, and Metro closed the case as insufficient evidence for prosecution, even though they have 3 independent eyewitnesses and vehicle descriptions and proof that Shane was there. Find the bodies Thursday morning, 2 days after they've been killed. They know immediately that Shane is one of the suspects. Okay?
Right.
They're able to ping his phone at the apartment at the time of the shooting. Text Detective Van Cleef, I go, you got any intel on the suspect in this double homicide? Knowing that they knew, and he goes, yeah, I heard about that yesterday morning. So I called him, and I said, you knew yesterday morning that Shane Valentine was a suspect in this double homicide that happened 8 hours after you outed me as a source of information, putting my daughter's life in danger. And you didn't think that maybe I should get a heads up? That maybe somebody should have called me and told me that he was a suspect in this double homicide? And I told him Tuesday when I said to him, I go, Shane Valentine is a murder waiting to happen. It better not fucking be my daughter. So within 8 hours, I was proven right because Shane Valentine was involved in the double homicide of these 2 kids. So he says to me, oh, you guys aren't in danger. You know, he's on the run. He's not worried about you guys. And I said, let me explain something to you. I go, he's already killed 2 people. You think he gives a shit about 2 more? I said, and apparently nobody cares about the crimes he commits, so he probably doesn't really have to worry about it.
And why do you think that nobody cares about the crimes he commits?
Because they never investigate them, and he never gets arrested for them, unless, of course, they're on videotape and they can't. I mean, they had opportunities over and over and over. I mean, he didn't even get charged in the case with the other judge's daughter, where he was there and he was directing her beating.
And why do you think it is? Why do you think he's protected?
Because he works for Molly Mall. He's protected. They've been paid to protect him.
Okay. The cops.
Yes.
By Molly Mall.
I mean, you're never gonna get them to say that, but he works for Molly Mall. He is associated with Molly Mall. You got Molly Mall paying off these cops to protect his people and his girls and go after the other pimps.
Right.
Shane Valentine works under Molly Mall, so he's protected. They wind up catching him sometime later in Burbank, California, sleeping in, lo and behold, the same rental car that he was in when he shot up Neo's house. Okay? Now, after the double homicide, they get Neo's phone, and there's like 40,000 text messages on it. Apparently, Neo never deleted his text. There's text messages between Neo and Shane. There's text messages between Ali and Neo, confirming that she has an involvement with Neo, prostitution-related involvement with Neo. And there are many, many, many other text messages on this phone, but I'm advised of this by the detective working the case, that they have this information. They therefore reopen the drive-by shooting at Neo's mom's house on October 8th and subsequently file charges against Shane for that, okay? Even though they didn't have enough evidence before.
I don't want to go too far off track in this podcast. I will have much more concerning the murders and Judge Tobiasson and related matters in future episodes. That being said, Judge Tobiasson mentioned a person by the name of Molly Mall. Jamal Rashid, a.k.a. Molly Mall, is a hip-hop music producer and longtime pimp. His 12-year reign as a sex trafficker ended in October of 2019 after the conclusion of a 5+ year investigation by the Las Vegas Division of the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Nevada. Despite Rashid's 12-year continuing criminal enterprise, U.S. Attorney Nicholas Trutnich charged Rashid with just one count of an interstate facility in aid of unlawful activity, operating a business enterprise involving adult prostitution. It was alleged over the years in Las Vegas District Court documents that Rashid had been providing payoffs to some Las Vegas Metro Police vice and criminal intelligence detectives for protection and to target rival pimps. In a prepared statement, U.S. Attorney Trutnich said last year, quote, "In the course of investigating Mr. Rashid, the U.S. Attorney's Office, in partnership with the FBI, did examine and develop information regarding allegations of related wrongdoing that generally have been the subject of media coverage. Following an extensive inquiry, we concluded that there was not sufficient evidence to support any additional charges relating to Mr. Rashid, his associates, or others, and therefore closed the investigation. Many people locally in Las Vegas are questioning the FBI's investigation and the U.S. Attorney's decision to just allow Rashid to plead to a single charge. Rashid has not yet been sentenced in that case." Judge Tobiasson told me during the interview that she allowed her daughter Sarah, who was underage at the time, to hang out and then work in an after-hours unlicensed club, Top Notch, that was run by pimps and frequented by other high school girls and off-duty Las Vegas Metro police officers. As for Shane Valentine, both Judge Tobiasson and her daughter Sarah had an involvement with Shane Valentine prior to the murders. Judge Tobiasson told me that Shane Valentine had attempted to recruit Sarah into prostitution. Judge Tobiasson said she was providing information to Las Vegas Metro Police vice detectives about the unlicensed clubs, including the one that she allowed her daughter Sarah to frequent. According to Tobiasson, Shane Valentine was harassing her daughter, and when the police failed to help her in July of 2016, Tobiasson said she called Shane Valentine's attorney and said, quote, "Hey, you might want to get your client a message that, if he calls my daughter again, I'm going to take care of it myself," unquote. Tobiasson stated that sometime later she went to Shane Valentine's house and kicked in the door. Judge Tobiasson is married to a now retired Las Vegas Metro Police Sergeant. In 2017, Judge Tobiasson reached out and befriended Connie Land, Cindy Land's mother. In a bizarre series of events, Judge Tobiasson convinced Mrs. Land that the police were corrupt, that the police couldn't be trusted, that the police were conducting surveillance on Mrs. Land, and that they needed to buy burner phones to communicate. Judge Tobiasson eventually convinced Connie Land to turn over to her all of the text messages between Connie and Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch, for reasons to this day remain unknown on why she wanted them. When I was interviewing Judge Tobiasson in May of 2018, she told me that she had all the text messages between Connie Land and Detective Dorsch. I didn't know the significance and the content of those messages until I made contact with Mrs. Land in late January of 2019. Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson's account of who committed the Land Kauffman murders contradicts statements made by the police. If the police had all the evidence that linked Shane Valentine, Dominique Thompson, and Frankie Zappia to the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman, then why is it that 3.5 years later, nobody has been charged in the case. Who is not telling the truth here? Why was Judge Tobiasson so interested in the murders in the first place? And why was Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Detective Jared Grimmett providing confidential details to Tobiasson about an open double homicide investigation? Why did Tobiasson want all of Connie Land's communication messages with Homicide Detective Mitchell Dosh? Now, some closing comments. Here lies the problem, no pun intended. The comments made by Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson about who committed the murders, about a cover-up, that the police destroyed evidence, and receiving confidential details about the double murder investigation from Detective Jared Grimmett are all troubling. What I find even more troubling, as I stated early in this podcast, is that for over a year and a half since I first wrote about Tobiasson's allegations, the Las Vegas Metro Police have been silent on Tobiasson's claims. They refuse to comment on the many media requests I have sent them regarding this issue. Is that because Tobiasson is telling the truth? Until such time Judge Tobiasson is proved to be a liar, her on-the-record comments must stand. If Judge Tobiasson is telling the truth, then we have a major corruption problem surrounding this case, as Tobiasson has alleged. Further, the next question is why was Detective Jared Grimmett releasing information to Tobiasson in the first place? He should have told her she was out of line, even asking him for any information about an ongoing criminal investigation. So, they are both at fault on that. Tobiasson for asking, and Grimmett for allegedly giving. Why was Judge Tobiasson even meddling in this case in the first place? Why did she say that the wrong two people were killed, that it was her and her daughter who were meant to be killed, not Sidney and Nehemiah? What does Judge Tobiasson know that we don't, and what, if anything, is she holding back, if indeed she was telling the truth about all of this? The Land Kauffman families would sure like to know why their kids were killed instead of Tobiasson and her daughter, as Tobiasson claimed. Tobiasson said she was out as a source of confidential information by Vice Detective Justine Gaddis just hours before the murders to police officer Ty Bowden and his daughter. I previously reported that Homicide Detective Mitchell Dosh confirmed to Connie Land in a text message that I previously published that Vice did indeed out Tobiasson at that meeting. What I never reported until now is that when Judge Tobiasson reached out to Connie Land in 2017, according to Connie Land, Tobiasson told her details of the investigation that were not in the public domain and that Land was unaware of. Connie Land told me that Detective Mitchell Dosh confirmed some of those details. So, if Tobiasson did not receive investigative details relating to the murders from Detective Grimmett, as Tobiasson stated she was, then where did she get that information from and why? Somebody leaked it to Tobiasson, and until such time it is proven otherwise, we have to go with Jared Grimmett. Earlier in this podcast, I said that I couldn't see how Metro Homicide was covering up the double homicide investigation, because some real good detective work was done when Detective Dosh went back to recover the bullet from the Kauffman residence. Homicide are the ones who were responsible for Shane Valentine going to prison for shooting into an occupied dwelling. So where's the cover-up with Shane Valentine? And as for Dominique Thompson, a.k.a. Damo, Frankie Zappia's pimp, who Tobiasson claimed was also involved in the murders, well, he too went to prison because of guess who? Metro Homicide. According to the search warrant, Metro Police raided Thompson's residences and vehicles on April 27, 2017, and recovered cash and firearms. Thompson, a prior convicted felon at the time of the execution of the search warrant, went to federal prison for a felon in possession of a firearm. He was released in December of 2019. So, I don't see a cover-up with Metro Homicide. I guess they thought that having both Valentine and Thompson incarcerated, someone would come forward with information implicating them in the murders, which apparently did not happen because nobody's been charged up until this date. Remember when Tobiasson said that everybody knows that what they did that day got 2 people killed, referring to getting outed to Ty Bowden and his daughter Allie that led to the murders? Well, I uncovered a text message that Judge Tobiasson had sent to Connie Land on October 5, 2017 that appears to contradict what Tobiasson told me in my interview with her in May of 2018. The text is as follows, quote, "I'm still not entirely convinced that the murders are connected to Allie. So Tobiasson wasn't entirely sure in October of 2017, but in May 2018, she said just the opposite to me. More on that text message in an upcoming podcast. Update on Shane Valentine. According to the Department of Corrections, Shane Valentine was granted parole and will be released from Nevada State Prison on September 16th, just a few days from now, and will be under the supervision of the Department of Parole and Probation with a projected expiration date of December 18, 2020. Time will tell if Valentine, a career criminal, will return to his old ways and once again victimize the Las Vegas community, including recruiting high school girls into prostitution. Valentine also has another problem. The word on the street is that he's going to be killed when he gets out of prison. His girlfriend even confirmed those rumors when in 2017 on social media, she said she was receiving phone calls telling her that Shane is going to be killed when he gets out of prison. The police made some very bad decisions and major mistakes in this case. I know it, and they know it. The cop that still lives inside of me, however, is still having a real hard time believing that homicide detectives don't want to solve this case. Homicide detectives live to close cases, and to their credit, Las Vegas Metro Homicide have even arrested both active duty and former Metro police officers for murder over the years. That being said, I'm not that naive to believe that if it was to their benefit, any law enforcement agency is capable of engaging in a cover-up. History and my own former personal experience in police work prove me correct. Surrounding this case, we have a sitting judge, retired and active duty police officers and their children, and some really bad criminals. Somewhere in all of this convoluted, disturbing story, the truth lies. After almost 4 years of no answers, the grief and anguish of the Land and Kauffman families will continue on. Sadly, for now, that is something they will have to endure. And the blame for that, until we get answers, well, that lies with Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Coming up on podcast number 13, an analysis of the charges against Judge Tobiasson.
Without